Harpinder Mann. What a great conversation with Harpinder. She's a yogi, I guess is the quickest way to describe. It's only a one part though, but she talks about going through uh, tough family situation, going to college, and then eventually getting a job and taking her to India where she takes her first kind of yoga class, and she's reduced to tears, and it just reshapes her life in a completely different direction. She started an organization, which is really cool, Women of Color Summit. She teaches yoga. She's a full yogi now. She's done thousands of hours of training. She's done 4 retreats where there's 10 days of silence. Um, you can't even write anything down. Talk about that, but just kind of the difference between Western yoga, excuse me, and what's taught there, of course, in India, the vast difference, and it's a really fascinating conversation. One of the biggest takeaways is how she describes discipline and what she accompanies it with, what she relates it with. And I'll just give you a quick tease, but it's devotion. A great story about the Buddha and uh, a child is born and dies, and what the mother needs to do, and the great lesson learned there. It was just a great conversation with Harbinger. I know you're going to enjoy it because I did. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. This goes well. Harpinder Mann, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Um, when practicing yoga, you know, does how deep does somebody have to practice it in order to get the full appreciation?
Again, it's practicing every single day. It's practicing on our mat. So, whether it's showing up for asana, the movement practice, whether it's sitting down for getting into that state of meditation, whether it's pranayama, breath work, but it's also thinking about how do we apply yoga in our relationship with ourselves, in our relationship with other people. Because if we're thinking about the yamas and niyamas, thinking about like ahimsa, nonviolence, um, satya, truth. Like, how can we apply that in our day to day life? So, yoga is something that is um, something we should be practicing every moment of our day. And it's something that drastically changed my life. And it came through an understanding of it's not just something I do for 1 hour a day. I'm done and I don't think about it till maybe the next time I get on my mat. It's something we have to practice and do on a continuous basis, on a continuous way.
It seems so holistic. It seems so. You talk about you were in at school. Your parents begged you to stay close, but you had nothing to do with that. You went to UCLA and eventually found yourself to India. I think it was around 2016, where it really made the big change. You broke down. You had tears, and you know, it just seems to be so holistic. Um, how do you practice it? Let's talk about that journey right there, where you saw it, where you kind of, you know, your yoga career, yoga life, you know, took a sharp turn.
Yeah, so I attended UCLA, my first year was 2011, and it was about 2013 when, um, I was feeling a sense of not really belonging, a sense of what is my path in college, what's my purpose, what's my life's purpose, and I think these are questions I've always asked ever since I was um, a young girl, is really trying to figure out like why am I alive? What's my purpose of being here? And already from a young age, you know, I'm having these very philosophical questions and trying to understand what's my place. Why do I think the way that I do? Why do people act the way that they do? Um, and going to UCLA, being transplanted away from my family, which at that time was a blessing because I wanted to get as far away from my family as possible. But it was still, you know, I'm still reckoning with the fact that I'm thousands of miles away. I don't really know. A lot of people I'm trying to understand. Seems like people are like, yes, like I am going to become a doctor. I'm going to become an accountant. And I'm like, how does everybody know? How does everybody know what they want to be? I don't know. So I'm just having these questions of I don't know who I am. I don't know who I want to be when I graduate. And I'd always known about yoga, being raised Sikhi, being raised, going to India. Um, but it felt like a very far away concept. Um, and I decided, okay, I'm gonna go check it out. Maybe this is something that's gonna give me some peace of mind. And the studios that I found near UCLA were like Core Power, Yoga Works, just your very franchised yoga studios that are very fixated on looking a certain way, practicing a certain way, very movement based, yoga as this exercise. And I remember going to these studios and I was just like, I don't know. I think there's more to yoga than what's being offered here. And I just had this feeling that there's more to it. I got lucky. After I graduated, I started working for a education startup. We went to India, and I was feeling the stress of okay, I'm in this like high level role. I'm the director of marketing of business development. Feeling really stressed out. Okay, but at least I'm in India. I'm in the land where yoga comes from. Let me check it out here. Went to the Ananda Sangha, and each time I left on the taxi ride back to the hotel where I was staying, it was just like full blown meltdown. Just felt so connected with the land around me, with myself. And I was like, wow, my whole life I've been searching for this like spirituality, for this sense of like, who am I? The sense of like, why do we all exist? And I found it going to yoga at Ananda Sangha. And that's not to say like these moments of clarity are an everyday occurrence, but being on this path and doing these practices always reminds me again and again, you know, why I exist and why we exist. So when like things get confusing, this is the path that kind of always like recenters me and brings me back. So I feel very grateful for being able to be on this path and coming to it at that time in my life.
Can you explain what you found in those sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm trying to think about where to even begin because
Mm.
even the space itself, just like plants all around it, you walk in, immediately someone's like, "Oh, hello, have you been here before?" All in Hindi. Just very welcoming. There's pictures of like Yoga Ananda up on the wall, of different like gurus, enlightened beings up on the wall. And it already just felt like a very nurturing, safe space. So I walk in, come into that. One of the very first classes I take is taught by 60, 65-year-old Indian woman, and she's sitting there in like a silvar kameez. And as soon as I sit down, she's like, turns her gaze upon me and just fully recognizes, sees me, and she's like, "Oh, like I've never seen you before. Like, where are you from?" Like, is just so excited to see me. And I don't think that's something that really happens when you go to like a core power or any of these yoga studios where you're maybe more just seen as like, okay, we got another student in class, we've made this amount of money, and it's more so just kind of like, okay, another student. You're not actually being seen for the fullness of like yourself as a person. In these classes, I don't think there was ever any more than like 5 or 6 people. I was typically the youngest by at least like 10 years. And the physical practice was always very gentle with enough like space and slowness given to really tune into like, as I move my body in this way, what are the emotions and feelings that are coming up? I have enough space that's been given by the teacher to actually sit with it and process. And it's like when I turn this way, I feel some grief or sadness. And what is that about? Instead of like speeding through it. And I think that's just an example of in our life, so many things happen to us on a day-to-day basis. There's so many like news that we're seeing of just really terrible, sad things that happen all the time. And I don't think we give ourselves enough time to really sit and process and understand. And I think what I found in that space where it was so slow and spacious and such a sense of belonging, where I was like, I can finally just breathe here. I can just take a break. I can just take a break and be okay. I can be okay. And right now, maybe I feel sad, or right now I feel confused, and I don't need to pretend to be anything else. Some of the other classes that they offered were kirtan, which is like devotional singing. They had meditation, they had pranayama, they had like community gatherings where everyone came together. Um, it just felt like a really loving space. And it's something when I came back to LA, luckily there's a community here as well. And I started going almost every single day. And that's just not something that's really prioritized, at least that I have found and with the students that I work with and other people in some of the way like the yoga studios are created in the West.
So that yogi instructor that you mentioned that kind of welcomed you, are you suggesting that she wasn't wearing Lululemon?
She was not
That's
wearing
a joke.
Lululemon. No, I mean, right? But it does make a difference. I was, what was I reading yesterday? I can't remember, but Lululemon for a while had this like brand slogan that was like, "This is yoga," and
Right.
that was their brand or slogan. I'm like, what is yoga? What are you saying yoga is? You're saying yoga are tights? You're saying yoga are these like slim people looking very
Expensive.
athletic, right? Expensive. Like, what are we trying to say? This is yoga. Mm.
And it's a shame how the West kind of bastardizes and commercializes something kind of so holistic like that. Um, and how long were these sessions, and did they actually cost you money to participate?
So these sessions range anywhere from 60 minutes, sometimes up to 2 hours, and the fee was very nominal. It was not much at all. Now I'm remembering what I was reading. Curvy Yogi is a yoga teacher based in um, Mumbai or Bangalore. It might be Bangalore. And I was reading a piece written by her. Something she was talking about is folks from the West will come to India. You're able to take these trainings, you're able to take these classes for far less than how much you take it here. And then they take all that and then come teaching on the West. And it's like this taking, this extracting. So something I've always been interested in is like, how can I give back? How can I give back from the land from where I've been able to learn and study and my family is from? So for me, it's always giving 10% back of everything I earn to different organizations in India. Because there's also this idea of like reciprocity. Instead of just taking, instead of just extracting and making money off of it, it's like, how can we acknowledge, give credit, and give back?
You hear, you'd from like in the '60s, you hear like these musicians in '70s, the Beatles and they'd go to India and they'd go on this kind of pilgrimage and they'd find enlightenment. What is it about the Indian country, the culture that that has this?
That's a good question. I think And I think about one of my friends in the space and colleagues, Mix Puja Singh. They were talking about how in India, God is in everything. Because in this understanding, in the spirituality, it's not God as this figure up in the heavens that's like looking down and judging, like you're bad, you're good, you're going to heaven, you're going to hell. In a lot of like Hinduism and Sikhism and in Buddhism in a sense, it's this understanding that we are God. That cow that you're looking at like from across the street is God. Like God is makes up everything. So I think when you have this understanding of in these religions and in these countries that God is everything, that affects the way people are treating one another. That you'll also see if you have you been to India?
I'm
No.
not.
Like there's flowers everywhere, there's little temples everywhere. It's not this like separated thing that we kind of see in the West, like you have to go to church or it's yeah. In India, it's very much like everywhere. You're just surrounded by people like praying, by flowers, and this sense of like God isn't everything. And I think that's what makes a difference. And I think what also makes a difference is in the teachings. In the teachings, it's talking about how can we treat one another better. It's understanding that everything that we need is within us. It's not looking outside of ourselves. It's through practice we start to figure out and realize divinity is within each one of us. Um, and I think that's why people go to India and they sense that and feel that for themselves. Um, yeah.
Very interesting. It always it occurs to me though. I remember the stories of, of forgive me if I have this wrong, but reincarnation. You come back as something else, and you're passed down. And I remember hearing the stories of like Mother Teresa going there, and I bet you I have this wrong, but there was some homeless that were there or something, and the locals would not pay attention to them at all because they deserve that life because of a previous life, whereas Mother Teresa was trying to help them, and there was kind of just a clash of culture there. Can you describe that better?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is the caste system.
Ah,
So the caste system, they're called Dalits. The untouchables is a way that the caste system terms them. But there's a lot of people that are very much trying to move away from this very patriarchal caste system that was created and saying like this person is deserving, that person is not deserving. And what yoga, because yoga is a spiritual practice, it does come from different religions, but it's not a religion. So what yoga is teaching us is that we are all divine, whole, complete, all connected to the same consciousness. So there is no I'm better than you, you're lesser than me. So there is this sense of when I think about it is like, how can we practice yoga? And as practicing yoga practitioners, students, teachers, it's also looking out into the world and seeing where there is injustice. And that's a huge injustice, like that caste system where people are kind of, you can only work this job. And I saw it in my own family. I saw it in my own family where Jat Sikhis, in the caste system, and I see it in the way that some of my cousins and uncles are very proud. They're very proud, like this is who we are. I've seen it in growing up. My family's always like, you have to marry a certain person. They have to be a Jat Sikhi person. And for me, I was like, I really don't care about that. That's not something I subscribe to, and I'm going to follow myself. Um, so I think all right, it all exists. Like the good, the bad, the ugly, it exists everywhere.
yeah, like you said, if God's in everything, well, then we're all equal. You mentioned that your father. I pronounce it Sikh, but I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure. I think you're saying pronouncing it a little bit different. Your mother was Punjab, I believe. Can you what what do we need to know about, I mean, I know very cursory things about Sikh, but you talk about the Sikh culture being prominent and proud, but perhaps your father not exactly practicing some of those? Do I have that
Yes.
right?
So Punjab is a state in India. It's in the northern part of India. Punjab translates into the land of five rivers, or the land of five waters. Sikhism is a religion. I think it's actually now the fifth largest religion in the world.
Really?
Yeah. Um, and Sikhism teaches things like how we're all equal, how men and women are equal, which I don't think a lot of religions really completely teach that or practice that. Men and women are equal. It teaches about how hard work is crucial, but hard work that um, I'm trying to find the words here that they use exactly. It's like hard work that is it makes a difference in the world. That's not causing any harm. So it's not just about finding work that's causing you to have lots of money, but in the process you're hurting the planet, hurting others. It's about finding work that is just, makes a positive difference in the world. They talk a lot about the equality amongst everybody, about giving back, about service. So Sikhism has made a huge impact for me, but it wasn't until I went to India on my own, and I started practicing yoga and really came back to it because it was a lot of domestic violence in my home, seeing that patriarchy of like men are better than women. And I was like, huh, how can you say that you're this very religious, like Sikhi person, but you're behaving in these ways? So for me, it caused a lot of like dissonance of like, well, you're saying these things, but what I'm seeing is very different in your actions. So I kind of separated myself. I kind of separated myself from Sikhism, really my culture. So I think that even made it a little bit more of a disconnection. I went to UCLA and I was like, well, who am I? If those are things I don't subscribe to or believe in, then even more so, who am I? And then being able to find my way to yoga and find my way to religion and spirituality on my own terms was incredibly healing.
We see that in every religion, Harbinger. We see many Christians that are not acting like Jesus, right? We see, um, it's just unfortunate, but we can grab the best parts perhaps and make ourselves better and try to make society better. You have you tell a great story, and I don't want to Buddha about the baby dying and the 3 grains of rice. It's a wonderful anecdote. Please share.
Um, the story with
Baby dies, Buddha says, I'll
yes,
raise your
yes,
child back if you."
yeah.
Yeah.
So I am a Vipassana meditator. So I have been to, I think, four Vipassana meditation retreats now. And for
Wow.
those that don't know, they're 10-day silent retreats.
Yes.
The only thing you can do in those 10 days is meditate, shower, take care of yourself, eat. But there's no speaking, there's no writing. Obviously, there's no phone, there's no technology. So it really, you deeply have to look at yourself. Um, in the evening time, there's always these talks, and the videos are by Goenkaji. Goenkaji is the one who brought Vipassana over to the West, and he passed away, I think, in 2013. So these are just recorded videos they're showing, um, and he tells this story about a woman who's wanted a baby for a really long time, has been praying for it. Um, just something that's so deep of a need for her. And finally, she has the baby. Um, and when the baby turns 2 years old, it passes away. And this causes the woman to become absolutely hysterical. She is just clutching the baby to her chest and wailing, and days go by, and she's still holding on to like the dead baby. And there are other people that come up to her very concerned, they're like, Mataji, which is like mother, and G is respect. Your baby has died. Like, please, let's do a funeral for him or her. Um, like, it's time. It's time. And she has absolutely like reached insanity, hysterical, and was like, no, like my baby's still alive. Like, there's no way, like, they can't have passed away like this. And so she's walking around town absolutely hysterical. And Wenkaji uses the terms by her good fortunes, by her karma. She collides with the Buddha. And she's like, oh, here's the Buddha. Like, he'll save the baby. So runs over to Buddha and is like, please, please save my baby. In all these stories, what I love with these stories of the Buddha is the Buddha never tells people, here is the lesson in this. It's always a realized lesson by yourself. Where he's like, here, go do this thing. And you're going to have this embodied, experiential, realized understanding yourself. I'm not just going to tell you. So he says to her, okay, I will save your baby. I'll bring it back, but you have to do this one thing. She's like, anything, anything. He was like, I need you to find a house to give you a few grains of rice and I'll bring the baby back. And she's like, oh, just that? Easy. I can do it. He's like, but wait, there's a caveat. You have to find a house where nobody has died. She's like, okay. She goes to house after house after house. The Buddha has said, he can save my baby if anyone can give me 5 grains of rice, 3 grains of rice. And everyone's like, oh my God, yes, like absolutely, let's save your baby. And she's like, wait, 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 but has anyone in this house died? And everyone with like long faces, oh yes, my mom died, my brother died, my uncle died here. And she came to this realization, everyone dies. There is no one that has not personally been impacted by death. And comes back to the Buddha with this understanding of like, I see, I understand. And that made a huge impact for me. That made a huge impact for me in the sense of I'm going to pass away. My family's going to pass away. All the people I love are going to pass away. And in Buddhism, they do teach take the time to meditate on death. Take the time to think about death because it makes a big difference. I think there's so many of us that kind of take this life for granted, that take the people around us for granted, that take these opportunities for granted. It's like none of it is. I really don't know if I'm going to still be in existence in a week, but I still operate like I'm going to be in existence in a week. But if I really take, and I think that was the biggest like takeaway I had from my last retreat this past September was I don't know how long I have. I don't know how long anybody I love has. Um, so how can I really be grateful each and every single day? But it's the funny thing about I think for me, and I think this takes it right back to the beginning of when you ask, like with yoga, how much to practice. I think that's why we practice every single day because how quickly do we forget these things, right? I forget all the time, man, I actually don't know when I'm going to live until. I don't know how long my family or my friends have. And if I really thought about that every single day, the way I would act and the way that I would speak to different would be so different. I feel like there'll be so much more love, so much more like, wow, can I be like really fully present with you right now? Um, that's like just the nature of our mind is sometimes we forget. We forget and go back to just our day to day grumblings like, oh, the person was supposed to email me. Oh, I'm stuck in traffic. And it's like, what a blessing. I get to be stuck in traffic. But yeah, thank you for having me repeat that story.
It's absolutely wonderful. I had to kind of, yeah, collect myself with that. That's a wonderful anecdote. Next to your name is listed, Harbinger Man, and then it says RYT-500. What is that?
So that's registered yoga teacher 500. Yeah, and the
Uh,
500 means I have 500 hours of yoga teacher training. I think there's also a designation in there in order to receive that that designation, that certification of having taught a certain number of hours. It's either 1,000 or 2,000. I think it's 1,000. So I've also taught over 1,000 hours as well.
is there a commission that trains and gets yogi certification? Is it international?
Yeah, good question. So the two that I'm familiar with are Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance is out of the United States. And then the other one I'm familiar with is Yoga Australia, because I did my first yoga teacher training in Australia when I lived there for 2 years, 2017 and 2018. So those are the two that I'm familiar with.
And those 10-hour 10-day retreats where you can't communicate. You can't talk, you can't write anything down. Describe what that's like. Is it it seems beyond it seems like almost like jail.
Yeah, Goenkaji has, a couple jokes he'll say here and there. He was like, "I bet you're so excited to leave this prison." And it is an external prison, but really even more than if we perceive it as an external prison, I'll go back to that. It's more the prison of our mind. Because in the place that we're at, like, we're getting all our food provided for. Our living accommodations are nice. They're basic, but they're nice. It has everything you need. Um, I think what it gets you to confront with is the mind that you have. Because I was able to see, like, wow, a minor inconvenience has happened and how frustrated am I? Wow, I have a small pain that I'm feeling in my knee and all I want to do is run away from it. Um, so I think more than externally the situation, it's more so having to sit with what kind of mind am I carrying around? Um, because you realize and you learn a lot. And I realized and I saw some things about myself. I was like, "Oh, I need to change that. I need to work on that." A couple of things that really came up strongly for me. I went to so there is a teacher that you're able to have interviews with for 5 minutes every day. I think I saw my teacher or the teacher there every single day, and she was like, "Oh," towards the end, she's like, "Well, it can't be of a passion a day without seeing Harpinder," just as a joke to me, and I was like, "I got questions." I was like, "A lot's coming up. I gotta see you." Um, and I expressed to her, I was having this sense of it's just the sixth day of this 10-day silent retreat, four more. But then I started thinking, but then when I go home, I have like all this work to do and I have all these things to do. And I was just like, wow. And I was like, I'm not happy here and I'm not happy at the thought of going home. What is all this discontentment? And she looked at me and she was just like, good. She's like, so you've noticed how much discontentment you have. She's like, work with that. It's good that it has come up. Um, and I love that. I love being able to see the parts of ourselves that cause us suffering, that cause us to not be able to be open and fully present and able to just sit with ease and to work with those things. So that's been a thing that I really look at when I'm starting to kind of feel this restlessness of like, oh, like I don't want to do this anymore. Like, oh, and I'm like, like it's not about the external situation. It's something going on in here. And how can I explore that a little more?
Do you have goals that you want to achieve when you're doing this?
It's a good question. So this past one, no, I didn't have any goals. I kind of just came in with an overall sense of like, I want more compassion. I want more
Hmm.
compassion towards myself. I want more compassion towards all beings. And I want more wisdom. I want more wisdom and I want more compassion. So those are my two intentions going in. Um, And and I was like, "And anything else that shakes up, you know what? I'm here for it." So I didn't come in with, like, too many goals, no.
And those can never be kinda truly measured, those 2 attributes, right? It's a continuous journey, so you wanna deepen that relationship with that and maybe even perhaps gratitude. But you did 4 of those. I just throw gratitude in because it seems like it adds to those, but, you've done 4, so you do the first one, and do you think, "Wow, I can't wait to do this again next year?"
I did do the 1st and 2nd one a year apart, so,
Yeah,
there
I
was a
assumed they were
part
Europe.
yeah, so there was a part of me that was like, "I wanna go back." Um, so as soon as it ends and I leave, and this time and the last 3, I've had someone either drop me off or pick me up, so this is the first time this year, like, I drove myself there, drove myself home. Like, this time when I got in the car and all 4 times, I should say, on the way home, music never sounded better.
Oh,
Driving never felt better. A simple
huh.
conversation with someone because I stopped at a cafe on the way back, and I was just like, "Wow," like, I have this ability to speak and, like, relate and make conversation. What a gift. And I think it goes back to that story with the Buddha is, like, we take things for granted. In those 10 days when you're not able to do any of those, then when I got them back, I was like, "Oh my god, like, these sound so good." So I think, like, in the couple weeks after is when the medicine is the strongest. When I'm really I spent the next, like, couple weeks after, like, sitting outside and just watching the birds and seeing the squirrels and just, like, taking things really slow, and I was like, "Wow, there's so much medicine here." But sometimes with the way the world works and my schedule works, I found myself very slowly kind of just going right back into all the work and all the things. And it's just such a reminder of like, where can I slow down? Where can I slow down and see the magic in the world all around us? Sometimes the magic is found in our laptop, is found in our work, but a lot of the times that's not really where it is.
I wonder how I would fare in such a pursuit. Um, what are your duties as a decolonizing activist?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. So I started the Women of Color Summit about February, March 2020. Um, and there was a lot of conversation around that time of decolonizing yoga, decolonization in general, when we're thinking about um, the stolen lands from indigenous folks, particularly in North America. So when we're thinking about decolonization work in that aspect, it's like, how do we give land back? How do we give credit back? How do we acknowledge, all the pain and suffering that's been caused by um, folks that have colonized and stolen and pillaged? For me, the decolonizing activist really speaks more so um, to the yoga piece, but I mean also speaks to in the sense of like I'm also a settler on this land. This is not my original homelands. I'm also, for me, I'm seated on unceded Tongva and Chumash lands, also colonially known as Los Angeles. So it's for me, it's understanding how can I be in better relationship with the lands, with the indigenous peoples, like past, present, and future. But in terms of yoga, it's starting to understand how has yoga been colonized. And when we think about how has yoga been colonized, it's attributing like yoga is only exercise. It's looking at things like, oh, I'm going to say namaste, or I don't even know that yoga's from India, but I'm going to practice because it looks cool and trendy. So for me, it's kind of bringing like the form of like honoring and saying how sacred this is back to the practice. And that's what I do a lot in my teachings and my presentations is talking about yoga is a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual path from the Indian subcontinent from over 2,500 years ago, over 5,000 years ago. And when we move away from this fundamental understanding that yoga's original intent and goals is all about liberation, about moksha. It's about self transformation and self realization. When we start to move away from the goals and start to think like, oh, I only do yoga because I'm flexible and I can put on my Lululemons, it really changes the way our mind is transformed because it's not being transformed in the way it was meant to in these practices. Because if we were really truly practicing yoga, we would be trying to move towards a more simpler, compassionate life, not accruing more things, extracting from the lands. So that's kind of where it fits in, like in the way that I teach, in the way that I host community, is how can we really think about those things?
You mentioned that when you were first creating the Women of the Color Summit, you were noticing that a lot of these practices were being taught by, you know, white, male, very non kind of foundational people, and you had an issue with that.
I did have an issue with it. Yeah. I did lecture on dismantling cultural appropriation in yoga. This was a couple months ago for Yoga Garden and SF. I'm a teacher on their trauma informed yoga teacher training. And in it, it was looking at Yoga Journal is a huge magazine publication website in the yoga industry. And it was looking at within the last these numbers aren't going to be right. So whoever's listening, I'm going to say 20 years, but it could be a different number of years. It showed that on the cover of the magazine, only 2% were folks of color. Only 2% of people. Where does yoga come from? If we're looking at like traditional Chinese medicine, where does it come from? If we're looking at Reiki, where does it come from? And we were also seeing in 2020, because of the pandemic, everything's kind of moving online. All these summits and conferences that were popping up, and it was just showing again white folks as the experts, as the leaders, as the people you ought to know in these spaces. I was like, that just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't sit right with me in a world where we have white supremacy, where we have certain parts of cultures that get extracted from, that get taken and changed and commodified. And so for me, it was just like, what can I do about it? How can I amplify and uplift Black, Indigenous folks of color, create community, and for us to be able to talk about these things, to be able to heal, to be able to be like, hey, I'm kind of mad about it, to feel sad about it, and to realize that it's not right. And I can't necessarily go out and change other people. I can't be like, hey, you can't do that. But what I can do is like create spaces where we can talk about it, where we can support one another. So I have to kind of recognize, what can I change? What can I control? What can I control? And I'll do what I can in my power, which was creating the Women of Color Summit and teaching the way that I do.
It's fascinating to me how, I do yoga very selfishly. I do it to get better flexibility, to help in some of my athletic pursuits. I do enjoy it. I always feel great doing it. When I started doing it years ago, I had a friend who introduced me, and I remember getting, emotional a little bit in the beginning, and then it just kind of, but I don't think about it every day like you, Harpinder. I don't. I do it once or twice a week, and I find myself after regular working out just going into child's pose and into cobra and then into, I just go into these positions because it's very natural for me and it helps. Perhaps that is a way of thinking about it more often, come to think about it, but, I just don't look at it that way, but I still enjoy the benefit. There must be plenty of people like me.
I would say probably the vast majority are
Yeah,
in the West are like you. But I mean, you're experiencing the benefits for yourself, right? There's a reason that you're going back. So it's like, okay, I'm finding my benefits. I'm experiencing why. Is it just physical? I mean, you got emotional, right? What was the
yeah.
what was brought up for you from an emotional basis?
This is years ago. Again, a friend introduced me, and, I just remember kind of my body going in different positions, and then, the atmosphere, like you mentioned before, all that kind of combination, and then just thinking my body telling me this is what you should be doing. This is
Mm.
something that you should be enjoying, that you should be pursuing. I just remember those sensations. Um, and by the way, anybody who's listening, men who's listening, there's mostly women in these things. Gentlemen, go and participate. I mean, there it can only. That's another issue we should talk about too. By the way, it's that it's mostly women. Why is that?
Yeah. Um, I think that's just the way it's been spread in the West. It's the way it's been
Mm,
spread in media. It's the what you see in magazines. It's what you see in TV and movies. So people have come to understand yoga is a skinny, white, affluent woman's exercise. So that's our perception of what yoga is. So if that's our perception, then who's not included in that picture? And then you're not going to want to go participate. And that's why you don't see men, because that's what people think yoga is. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting all the people that get left out, that don't practice, because there's this false understanding this is what yoga is, and it's like that's not what it is.
I agree, and it's, yeah, skinny white women, expensive, that comes to mind, because the clothes are expensive and the memberships are not really expensive, but not cheap anyway, but, it's too bad. It's too bad that that's the way it is. I really enjoy it, and when I found that you were coming on the podcast, I found myself going a little bit more. I found
Mm,
myself, um, getting invited to it. I do enjoy it, and come to think about it, like I coach my girls in soccer, and if a girl had like hurt or twisted her back, I would put her right into Cobra. I would actually like kind of come to think about it. It's more integrated than I believe. It's need to pursue it more. On the podcast, Harbinger, we talk about discipline. I lost a lot of weight.
mm,
People ask me how I lost the weight, like they want some secret, like they don't want to do the work. And I just say discipline. The doctor said I wasn't going to see my daughter graduate. By the way, she just graduated Cal State in your backyard.
amazing.
And just discipline and focus. That's what it took. And I hear that a lot in what you talk about. I mean, I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life.
So it's so funny. I was journaling yesterday, and I've journaled on this before. The two words that I try to hold really close to myself is discipline and devotion. Because I think we need discipline. For me, I need discipline to stay committed to my practice, to stay committed to, okay, I'm going to wake up early in the morning, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to pray, I'm going to do my pranayama, I'm going to do asana, some movement, I'm going to read the Yoga Sutras, I'm going to read from some wisdom texts. Some mornings I wake up and it's cold and it's still dark and I don't want to get up. I'm like, oh man, it's so cozy in my bed. If I could just continue. And I have those mornings, I'm still human. But it's that discipline that gets me up, that gets me to stay on this path. Understanding that, it's the small steps we take that get us to that larger goal. Um, but what I also combine that with is devotion. I have devotion in that if I personally am disciplined, then there will be change. That there is a um, this oneness, that there is a God who sees the discipline, and I have that faith, and I have that. I guess I'll use the word devotion again. I have that trust, that faith, that devotion that if I stay disciplined, there is going to be transformation. There is going to be change. Because if we are disciplined with something, but it's like, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. That's great, that like non attachment. But for me, I can't have discipline without devotion, without knowing that there's a bigger sense of picture here. There's a bigger meaning to why I'm doing these things, and yoga teaches that as well.
So often I get pushback on discipline in that people almost have like a uh, teacher child or a militant kind of, but you accompany it with devotion. That's fascinating. How I wonder if I asked you about discipline before the 2016, before the kind of you know this journey that you're on. I wonder if the answer would have been different as a youth.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I I don't know what I was doing in my past lives, if we're thinking about karma. But
Mm.
somewhere along the way, I think I've accrued some good karma. Because I even remember as a kid being very disciplined. Around like 12 years old, I understood fast food is not good for me. Soda is not good for me. And I completely stopped doing those things. And from 12 to now, I don't eat fast food. I don't drink soda. I also follow Ayurveda, which is a sister science to yoga, which talks all about like how to live, how to sleep, how to eat, and much more. And as a kid, I would read all the time. I was really committed to learning as much as I could because I always felt, even as a kid, my family's pretty dysfunctional, and they have this life that they see for me where I get married when I'm 19, and I kind of have to just listen to what my husband says. And I was like, no, I think there's more to life than that. I think the only way I'm going to be able to find the life that I'm seeking and I'm wanting is if I work really hard. If I work really hard in school, if I like read a lot, if I and I ever since I was also young, I've also been really into working out, like running. I used to go for runs all the time. I was tennis captain. I was on the track team. And these are things my parents wanted to keep me from. They're like, no, we don't want you doing these sports. And I had to fight. And I was like, no, I'm doing these things. Like, you can't stop me. Um, so I feel like even as a kid, I was very disciplined. I was disciplined as a teenager. I was disciplined in middle school. Um, and it's just something that was just a quality within me. It's just a quality I've had since I was young. And it's those things when you think about nurture versus nature. And I think it was just a part of my nature, which I'm very grateful for.
To be a yogi is discipline a quality, a necessity?
Absolutely. Um, there's an idea of tapas. So tapas is this like fire, like this fire of discipline that you need to keep to burn away the impurities of the mind, to burn away the impurities, say, of body. So we need this fire. We need this discipline to keep going on our path, because otherwise, we're just going to stop. It's a lot easier. And I was talking to my yoga teacher a couple weeks ago. I'm writing a book. I signed a deal a month ago now, and it's been one of the hardest things I've done. And I was telling her, and I was like, you know what? I could just sit on the couch and eat bonbons all day, but I want to achieve amazing things, and I have in the past, and I want to in the future. And I was like, so I am consciously making a decision every single day to go after the things that mean something to me, and not just sit around and do nothing, and sit around and just wait for life to happen to me.
Do you think if you didn't get that job with the, startup education and didn't go to India, would you have found yoga? Or would it have found you maybe?
That's a great question. So one of my other yoga teachers, Vikram G, talks about like these seeds that are already within us. And they come from past lives and from our karma, like blossoming in different ways. And I think I would have found yoga no matter what. I think I was meant to be on this path. Um, am I a all seer? And am I ever actually going to know that? No. But I think the part of me that has just always been this like seeker, truth seeker, just so interested in like service and understanding why is there injustice in the world. I think those are all things that really aligned me to the path of yoga. And I think no matter what, I would have found my way there.
Just from what I know about you, I would think that'd be the case too. It seems that way. Um, Harpinder Mann, what motivates you?
Hmm. I think what motivates me is there's a couple of things that are popping up. So I'm going to do my best to give space to what is wanting to be seen right now. The first thing that kind of popped up is relationship. I think what motivates me is being in a loving relationship with myself and with those around me. Um, I just think about, even in this conversation, us talking right now, I think about with close friends, we've just been hanging out or just laughing, like with my partner's family. When you just feel so loved and so seen and you're having fun, you're like, wow, like I know I am meant to be alive is just to experience love. So I think what motivates me is wanting to be in loving relationship, wanting to be in relationship where I see the person across from me, they really see me, or just in like beautiful conversation. So that motivates me. All the people that I haven't met yet that are just gonna like completely astound me and just like, wow, you're so amazing. And you bring something up in me as well. I think that motivates me is wanting more of those kinds of relationships. I think what also motivates me is there's just so much to experience that I haven't experienced yet. And that excites me, that potential. I think that potential of there's so much more to be experienced that I haven't yet. And some of that experience is going to come through my own practice, going to come through my own practice of meditating this inner experience, but also an experience of I get to go to this country I've never been to before, and I get to be a part of their culture, and that really motivates me. Um, yeah.
I think it was on your website. The question was, what are you obsessed with? And you said exploring infinite creative potential within all of us, which I think is pretty much what you just summarized there.
Mm.
You also talk about your sun sign. Astrology is something I know very little of. Leo in Western astrology and Cancer in Vedic astrology.
Yes. So Vedic astrology comes from India, and I have personally found Vedic astrology to be incredibly purposeful, useful, very intense. I'm not an astrologer myself, so I'm much more a, hey, you're really good at reading astrology. Tell me all that I need to know. So I think it provides like another useful map to make sense of the world, and it's definitely a tool within my tool belt.
That's what I was hoping you were gonna tell about me, so I was, hoping that you knew a lot about it, but, yeah,
I can connect you with someone.
I don't quite I'm a Cancer, and
Oh.
I looked up sun sign because I didn't know it was different in astrology, and I went and I found, put my birthday in, and I'm a Cancer as well, but
Hmm.
really don't know what that means. Every time I ask somebody, it seems they kinda give different answers, but perhaps I'm not giving it enough credence. I don't know. How do you measure success?
Hmm. I think I measure success by the things I'm doing on a daily basis. Am I working with the people that I would like to work with? Am I finding enough time to rest? Am I finding experiences that give me joy? Am I laughing every single day? I think success is also measured to me by freedom. Do I have freedom of choice? Do I have freedom of time? And after graduating UCLA, I was very interested in how can I work for myself? How can I work from home? Like I was very into remote working before the pandemic, and we were forced into that world. Because I already could kind of sense I'm not interested in working for someone and having someone else dictate whether I'm able to take a week off to go on vacation. I'm like, "What? I get to choose whether or not I'm able to do that." So I think success for me is like, do I have freedom? Do I have freedom to make choices? Do I have freedom in terms of my bank account? Do I have freedom in terms of who I choose to get to spend my time with? Um, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I work at a teen mental health center. So I work with teens who um, have been bullied, have depression, anxiety, just so many different things. And we got the group of us got into a really lengthy conversation. This was 2 weeks ago, where they were talking about I'm bullied. This kid assaulted me, and it was just really heavy stuff. Um, And what it brought up for me is in that school setting and in a lot of different like workplaces and things, you're not choosing who you're surrounded by. You're not choosing in this class of 30 people, I want to be with that person, that person. You're just all shoved together. You're all shoved together, people with their different insecurities and issues and projections. And we're not taught how to heal at such a young age. It's not even a safe space. Um, So I think for me, thinking about that and being in those experiences, very important that I get to choose who I'm spending my time with 'cause it's valuable.
Yeah, I can't imagine if, well, I guess I could if, I have a tech business, but if an employee came to me and said, "I have to take 10 days off to be silent," what would I say? I mean, that would be odd, I guess, but, I guess I would pursue it. Harpinder Mann, thank you so much for your time today. I know we had a little bit of difficulty doing it before. I'm glad we finally got it to work. I really appreciate your time. How can we get in touch with you? You've got many, many websites, of course, with your women of color as well. What are some of the sites? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone is interested in having me present or speak or teach at your organization, if you want to work with me one on one, you can visit my website, harpinderman.com. That has access to all of my social media across Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I'm Harpinder Man Yoga and the Woman of Color Summit.com and the same handle across social media. And yeah, I would love to be in connection with some new people.
Absolutely. And Harpinder, HARPINDERMANN, and Women of Color, Women, WOMXN of Color Summit.com. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I wonder, you've got a great Instagram too. I don't ever remember seeing one of you dancing with your cat. She really loves it.
I actually don't think I have any posts on my feed of me dancing with my cat. Maybe that's something I'll need to do soon. But yes, I assume she loves it, but I don't know if she actually loves it or
I can't imagine she wouldn't, and that's not a guilty pleasure at all. It hurts no one and benefits everyone. Harpinder, thank you so much for your time. And if we're in the same geography, perhaps with our partners, we can all get together and have some a cup of coffee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone
You
for
be well.
listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.